So here we go. We are moving on to the last 3 holes of the final 9 with an absolute race happening. So this is hole number 6 on the East course. This is a 325-foot shot. They're going to have a headwind and a crosswind at times. It's going to be swirling all over the place. They're going to have to throw an ante that goes out over the OB grass the whole way and comes back in and lands on a side hill. This is an extremely difficult shot, both from looking at it now and in playing it. This is always a difficult hole to come to when you have to make things happen. So you can see Nate and Crispin turned over their shots just fine. They're sitting in the middle. Ben going with a big shot here. He looked like he actually tried to throw a roller and he found his edge, but the problem is he's going to go way deep on that one. You got to be careful with the rollers on this one. They can get away from you so fast, and there is just absolute, this hole is surrounded by OB. Everywhere that your disc is going to go, it seems that there's an OB waiting for you. So here comes Ron off of the box, off of that last missed putt. He's throwing the high roller as well. And there it goes. It lands good and is rolling nice. And Ron curls up, is going to give himself a putt. What a great shot after a bad hole. So Nate now being 1 stroke back. He'd love to put this one in and put some pressure on Ron and Ben, probably about 40 feet up the hill into the wind, and he stalls it out. He's going to have just a little cleanup left. So here's Ben from probably 80 feet deep. If the basket was in the long position, that would have been a fantastic drive. But as it is, it puts him far enough out where all he can do really is lay up. Now here's Crispin coming in from about 50 or 60 feet. And he lays up as well. So Ron, after having those 2 out of the last 3 holes, having less than stellar performance, he can step up on this very difficult hole. And I have no doubt that he's going to make this. After missing that last one, he's going to bear down. He checks the wind and gets ready. And Ron's going to put this in for a deuce. There we go. That's the Ron Convers that everybody in Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas has been beaten by. So here's Nate to clean up his 3. All right, so we are coming down to the end here. Nate and Ben and Crispin cleaning up their 3s with Ron getting the lone deuce. So now Ron has a 1-stroke lead heading into what used to be the final hole of the East course. Now they've changed the numbering. This is 7 on the East. It is a 370-foot downhill shot. You've got an OB parking lot on your right, and you have a tall grass OB on your left with a bunch of big cedar trees. Ron actually bounces off the flagpole and skips down there. That's going to be just fine. You want to throw right off the edge of that flagpole that Ron hit, out over the parking lot pretty much, and hyzer back in. There you go, right around it. Come back in. You can even skip off the parking lot if you need to, well, just like Nate did right there. Leave yourself by the tee box of the next hole, and that's going to leave you about 100 and something feet down the hill into this island green. Crispin going with the hyzer as well. And just to give you some perspective, this is right on top of the hill. The wind is going to be coming left to right, possibly a little bit in the head, but it's definitely pushing you towards the OB there if you turn something over. So Ben goes with a low power shot right over those pylons. That was a fantastic drive by Ben, keeping it low and out of the wind. So now here comes Crispin going into this green. They are throwing over OB grass down a hill, and you see that giant cedar tree on the right, and then there are 3 cedar trees that have been shaved on the bottom, and the basket is right in the middle of those 3 trees just behind them. So you're throwing down a hill. The green itself is a downslope to the basket, and then it flattens out, and you have that tall grass surrounding the green on all sides. So you have to be very careful coming into this green. You don't want to come in with too much speed. You can't come in too high because the cedar trees are going to grab you. You can't come in too low because the tall grass is going to grab you. It is a very difficult green to approach to, and you can see Ron checking the wind, and he has a headwind coming right at him, which is going to make it difficult if he wants to throw any sort of flat shot. So Ron looks like he's going to go with the flick here. Coming into left from the left to the right is advantageous here because that's the open side of the green, and it'll allow you to keep your disc low. That is fantastic. He looks, I bet he's within 5 or 10 feet of the basket right there, assuming his disc sat down when it hit. Ben now coming in righty as well. There you go, and he goes with the flat shot. That's a great idea. And he's wearing a green shirt, by the way. So Crispin now looking for his disc. This is the problem with this green, is that if you try to play too safe to make sure you stay in bounds, you're going to find this cedar tree. And when you find this cedar tree, you're going to find all sorts of things that you don't want, like sap in unmentioned places and extra strokes on your card. Crispin is trying to get in there. I bet this tree is 30 to 40 feet across. Those branches are heavy and thick, and every one of those little green bristles is digging into your neck and the back of your knees. And he is still fighting to get in there. I bet if he would listen close, he would hear some sort of tribal music going on. He is so far in the jungle right now. The other problem is that once you can get into this, you've got to get yourself a position where you can stand. You've got to find yourself a position where you can throw. And then you've got to try to get it out of there without whacking anything so that you give yourself a good shot for your next one. So Crispin punches out, just throws a little roller to get out in the open. He left himself a putt, so that's a win from that position right there because he was way in there. That's what you call taking your medicine, kids. So Nate is now gone into the abyss to look for his disc. It looks like he's maybe 5 or 6 feet in. That's going to be a tough spot to save a par from. He's probably looking at about 35 feet on his putt, with the first 5 to 10 of that being through the trees. Now maybe he found a little bit of trail. There's all sorts of traffic that goes into that tree, because as you can see, 50% of the people on this card went digging in there. So Nate looking to keep pace and not drop any strokes. Maybe his putt's about 20 or 25. And he sizes it up and flies out of the trees and into the basket. What a shot by Nate, keeping his chances alive. Now here's Ben cleaning up his par after a great approach. And he hits off the cage. Wow. That's going to put him in a tough spot with a couple to go. Crispin now zooms right past and goes zinging towards the OB. Wow, that was an aggressive putt. And then he saves that one. So Crispin is going to end up taking a 5 on that hole. Ben with a 4, and here's Nate, or here's Ron, to clean up his 3 and keep pace with Nate. So there we go. We're moving on to the last hole. With Ron and Ben, Ron having a 1-stroke lead in the final 9, which gives him a 2-stroke lead overall going into the last hole, and Ben is now 3 strokes back. This is hole number 8 on the East Course, 367 feet downhill. The first 300 of that are over this tall grass. So it doesn't really come into play unless something bad happens on your drive. And then you wanna throw something stable out there to the right and let it hyzer back in. And here comes Ron with a picture-perfect description of what you want to do. And that's how you win tournaments, folks, is when it really matters, you step up to the last hole and you absolutely park it. So if Nate or Ben want to cause Ron any problems, they're going to have to go for ace runs here. The problem is that right behind this basket, you've got an OB road and a giant tree that you don't want to get stymied behind. So here goes Nate. It almost looks like it's just a race for second place now. There's Nate, and there's that giant tree. He's going to get stymied behind that. That thing is big. I bet there's a couple of hobbits living in there. So here comes Ben. He's 2 shots behind Ron. He's got a 1-shot lead over Nate right now. So he's got to be careful. He'd love to get a deuce on this hole and just to stretch that out, or at least put it in a position where Nate has to make his putt. And there you go. He leaves himself about 15 or 20 feet short. Great drive by Ben. The wind is coming off of their left-hand side, probably a little bit in their face. Crispin going with turning over a stable disc. What a great shot. And he snuggles right up next to the hobbit tree. He's got probably 15 feet. So here's Nate. He's going to have to hyzer around this tree from a knee, it looks like. You want to be careful when you're doing shots like this to not get too cutesy, trying to get too close to the tree to make sure you have a perfect putt, because you can end up whacking something like that and staying right behind it. So Nate leaning on right next to the pole for an alternate pin position. He's got about 30 feet to go around this tree and back to the basket. He'd love to put this in to put some pressure on Ben's putt. Oh, and there you go. He whacks the tree but gets through. So here's Ben. He has this to wrap up a 2-stroke win over the third-place competitor, and he hits the top link and goes in. Wow, it wasn't pretty, but it worked. It's putts like that when you're happy there aren't pictures on a scorecard. Write down a 2 and move on. Crispin, with a fantastic drive, drops in his birdie, and here comes Mr. Ron Convers, stepping up. This is his final putt of the tournament to win by 2. Ron Convers. He is the champion of the Dynamic Disc Open 2013. Congratulations, Ron. What a fantastic tournament. Great performance there on the last couple of holes after you had a rough patch there in the middle. That's what a champion is, folks. Doesn't mean that you have perfect holes. It just means that you don't let them get to you. And you perform when it counts. So here's the competitors congratulating one another.
All right, Ron, champion 2013 Dynamic Disc Open. Take us kind of through day one first.
Day one. Wow, it seems a long ways away today. Day one, we played West first and finished it up pretty well. It's always, they had it stretched a little bit at the end, so 17 and 18 were both really, really difficult, and I managed to get through them pretty well. I threw some good shots. I had 2 miscues, so when we finished up all tied up, I was a little surprised because we all shot well, but at one point I thought I was a couple down, and I thought that Crispin actually had me by a stroke when we finished, and I was glad it was all tied to see how it ended up.
Now day two, we'll go to the final 9. Wiggins was not far behind you. He had pulled in from round 3, correct?
Yes. The third round, Ben and I went into, the third round was really sort of strange. I played really good to start, and then I had a dead spot. Basically, the holes we just finished on the final 9 were terrible. I mean, I flat out, I had a bogey, then a par, then a bogey, then a par, then a bogey, and it was holes that I normally am pulling a 2 out of, or at least parring, and so it hurt, and he was getting those, and it made things go really tight really fast. We both finished pretty well. 18 on East in the stretch position is also, it's a real bear, and everybody got a 3 on it to finish out the last of regulation. Now we went into the final 9. I was 1 stroke ahead of Ben, and the other 2 gentlemen were 4 strokes off of me. And we started out with a par, and then on the second hole, it's a blind hole where you have to turn to the right around some cedar trees, and I threw a roller, and I was about 20 feet off the pin. I didn't know it whenever I, got done, but Ben knew it was going to be good, and he got aggressive and threw a pretty hard shot that went past the hole and into a shelter house, and so he took a 4 coming out of that hole, and I got my 2. Okay, so things are looking up to me right there. We both missed our putts on the third hole, And on the fourth hole, I thought I had a really nice drive coming in, and it caught a limb and kicked me into a cedar tree. And I really didn't have anything to get out of it. I tried a 2-finger roller, and it gave me a reasonable putt. But the angle I was at when I threw the putt, I caught a little bit of wind, and it rose up and hit the top of the basket and skipped out of bounds. So I took a 5, and Ben took a 3. Well, we're back at where we started. And the next hole, which is probably the easiest hole on the course, the only problem you have there is you can get a little bit deep and catch an OB stroke. But I, for some reason, had lost my composure and threw it very poorly. I caught a little bit of extra wind, more than what I thought, and I turned something over and ended up way out, and I ran at it, but Ben made his putt, and that put us tied going into the series on East, which is, it's a pretty hard, used to be the old finishing series, and now it's right in the middle of the course, but it's 6, 7, and 8 on East. And 6 is has a lot of OB around the basket. It's almost an island. You have to throw a pretty safe shot and then come over it. This morning I threw a field ace in from where, you know, I normally land. I try and go just around the big pine tree and then throw up to it and take my 3. And I did basically the same thing this time. I had an easy putt, and Ben got into a little trouble and missed his, and I was looking at, okay, here we go, and I got sidetracked and didn't think about what I was supposed to be doing and worried about other things and put it right into the face mask. And so we're still tied, and I got a little mad at myself. And so on the next hole, I threw a really good shot. I threw an air roller up over everything with OB to my left, and dropped it within probably 25 and made the putt. Ben went basically towards where the long pin would be, and so he had to just lay up. Hole 7 is it is an island hole where you have to negotiate a stretch of grass. So you come around the cedar trees and the flagpole and the statue and all that, and a parking lot, and I threw it pretty good there. Everybody else tried a hyzer, and the wind, although it doesn't appear to be, the wind's sort of bouncing at about 15 mile an hour, but it's bouncing between, it's coming from the south, but it's bouncing between east and west, and so it's hard to tell which way. And it had switched a little bit more to the east, and then it was going back. And so whenever they threw, it smashed them into the cedar tree. So I threw a forehand shot to get underneath the cedars, have it smash me down and get underneath the cedars, and it worked out well for me. Left me with about a 25 downhill, and Ben threw a good shot, but he was a little bit further out, and I think the wind got him a little bit, and he ended up face masking it, and I took it, and then threw a nice shot on the finishing hole to end up 2 strokes ahead.
Well, yeah, it was a pretty intense, I would say, one of the more intense Final Nines I've filmed in a while, so that was definitely a good show.
I didn't like it at all.
I bet you didn't.
Missing putts is totally out of character for me, and yeah, it was really frustrating, and I was just trying to hang on to my composure and stay on it. Ben's a really good player, and I expect him to do great things in the future.
All right, well, in the end, you pulled it off, so congratulations.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us here for the Cool Daddy Slick Breeze coverage of the Dynamic Disc Open. If you have any more need for video, go see Cool Daddy's YouTube channel. You can check out lots of the videos at the Dynamic Disc site. We're glad you joined us. We hope to bring you a lot more in the future. Thanks for watching.